we should move on to Gaza now, because the depravity you're talking about has hit new lows, and it's hard to fathom, but it has.
Yeah.
Last time we covered the establishment of this fake humanitarian group called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Israel set it up to basically permanently end the presence of the UN in Gaza, the World Food Program, UNRWA, and to advance its ethnic cleansing campaign by forcing Palestinians to travel south for meager amounts of aid, which can then be used to entrap them and push them out of the territory, which is Israel's ultimate goal. And toward that end, we've had massacres being carried out against these desperate people seeking aid, basically lured in by the promise of food by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, only for Israel to open fire on the people seeking aid and claiming that the Israeli forces were threatened. And so they had no choice, which was just, it was obvious that this was going to happen all along.
This is just a look at the concentration camps that have been set up by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which, as Israeli opposition figure Avigdor Lieberman, former deputy prime minister, and Israeli opposition de facto leader Yair Lapid have said, is basically a shell for the Mossad and the Israeli military. How did we get to this point? My son hasn't eaten bread for 4 days. And we've since learned that this shell corporation, which was launched in, he's saying, I'm waiting for my children. People started crushing one another. That this shell was set up in Switzerland by mercenaries, corporate hitmen, and Boston Consulting, which is the former consulting firm of Mitt Romney and Benjamin Netanyahu. They both worked there, was actually involved in setting this up as well. And they've created these disastrous Running Man style concentration camp distribution hubs. You can see some of the US mercenaries there who are being recruited by firms that were set up by former CIA field operations officer Agent Philip Riley, Safe Reach Solutions. They're recruiting former US Special Forces. And then behind them is the Israeli military opening fire on people. And we can show you some hideous footage, but we don't want to get demonetized. But you can see how it really is a new level of depravity in Gaza that looks like something out of a science fiction horror film. This is footage taken by someone who is eventually killed by the Israeli military at one of these so-called distribution hubs. And you can hear the gunfire behind him. And this man was later killed trying to get food for his family. If we move ahead, in about 10 seconds, you will hear mortar fire and tank fire. You can see a wheelchair near him. So dozens are being killed at these distribution hubs every day, it seems, just trying to get food.
And what happened on Sunday, where around 30 people were killed near one of these sites in Rafah? It was so obvious that Israeli forces had opened fire, but Israel issued one denial, and all of a sudden that led all these media outlets, including the Washington Post, to backtrack, to the point where the Washington Post even deleted a story or a tweet about this, simply based on the fact that Israel had denied it. Then, of course, the inevitable follow-up reporting happened, and even CNN and Haaretz, they both confirmed that indeed Israeli forces did this. And they pointed to witness testimony, video evidence, and obvious discrepancies in the Israeli account. But here's the Washington Post. The Post didn't give proper weight to Israel's denial and gave improper certitude about what was known about any Israeli role in the shootings. What does that mean, improper certitude about what was known? So simply because Israel denied something that makes certitude improper, that Israel carried out yet another massacre when there's been countless massacres for the last year and a half. And of course, this correction now looks just even more ridiculous, given that other Western outlets, Haaretz, CNN included, have confirmed that Israeli forces did carry it out. And not that we need Western outlets to confirm this, but it's notable that even they had to admit the truth.
Yeah. And CNN, by the way, pointed to that footage I just showed as part of their evidence, part of their video evidence to confirm that massacre. The Washington Post had come under pressure from Bill Ackman, who was himself acting on behalf of Tel Aviv. It was pretty clear why they deleted their factual reporting. Why would you believe the mendacious, pathologically lying, Holocaust-denying psychopaths in Tel Aviv anyway after the last 18 months? Well, they continue to do it. And it's not because they believe in the truth. It's because they're afraid of the political pressure and financial pressure.
Yes. And you have to wonder there, I mean, Bill Ackman's friendly with Jeff Bezos. Was there a personal phone call made there? I mean, that's fair to speculate given how these people work. These these mega billionaires, they know each other, they hang out, they're in the same circle. And so did the order come on down from Jeff Bezos? I mean, whether it did or not, it doesn't really matter. The point is these outlets conform to even the most minimal Israeli Zionist pressure. But it's just an example of how journalism is just completely corrupted. And there's no bigger example than the Holocaust than in their coverage of the Holocaust of our time, Gaza.
Yeah. And Bill Ackman on Twitter said as much, that he called Bezos. So it's more than a theory. Back to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, just trying to put it into context. The reason it's been created is because Israel wants to privatize the genocide. And I'll try to pull up the piece that we have up at the Grayzone. But they have put in a plan, what they call like humanitarian islands plan in the Gaza Strip, that will prevent the population from returning to the north and will allow them to annex and take over the north. And here, I got it right here. And they've starved the population out. They spent about 3 months after the Gaza ceasefire under Trump starving the population to create the context for the humanitarian islands in Gaza. This is an Israeli army document that I embedded in a piece on the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. You can see there's these red arrows are their supposed hubs. And there's no hub in the northern Gaza Strip because they want to eliminate it. Then you have the Netzarim corridor here, the corridor of death. And they're trying to push most of the population below the corridor of death. And most of the hubs are set up in Western Rafah in the south. That red arrow all the way to close to the Mediterranean Sea in the south is where you're seeing most of the violence now, most of the Israeli slaughter of Palestinians. And of course, they want them in the south because the south is closest to the Sinai Desert, and they want to push the Palestinian population into Egyptian hands and begin the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. This has been spelled out openly by Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and has been alluded to by Netanyahu, who calls it voluntary migration. A Penn State poll published last week shows over 80% of the Jewish Israeli public supports the full ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip. So a starving population is being pushed to these hubs. The other objective is to prevent the United Nations from restoring aid because they're very effective at doing it, and that will allow the population to stay put and stay alive. They got to keep the UN out, and Hamas has to be removed from the equation because Hamas had been providing protection effectively through its police forces, which are just, Gaza's police, municipal services, to the aid convoys so they could reach their destination and wouldn't be looted. So the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is designed by Boston Consulting, one of the major financial consulting firms that does a lot of private aid schemes. Boston Consulting just pulled out because of the scandal around it. And so too did the COO of Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and the CEO, Jake Wood, who's former special forces and had some credibility within the world of veteran, within the veteran world and within the world of humanitarian aid. He pulled out and said, this doesn't look like an actual aid project to me. And he saw the writing on the wall. He pulled out like 48 hours before they first deployed in Western Rafah. And here's who has now been brought in to replace them. Reverend Johnny Moore. We must help these people, and the old way of doing things just won't get it done. Meanwhile, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has delivered 7 million meals in just 8 days in one of the most complex and dangerous humanitarian crises of our time. None of it is easy, but it is critical. We welcome others to join us. And here's the announcement. This is pure cronyism. Reverend Johnny Moore is a major stooge of Donald Trump who served as a commissioner of his U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom. Doesn't actually believe in religious freedom. And was a former PR man for Jerry Falwell Jr. down in Lynchburg, Virginia. Is also involved in the Syria post-regime change scam of trying to get U.S. companies contracts in Syria. But it's basically pure cronyism right now. The Trump administration has set up a front organization. They've taken ownership of this, and what they're doing is they're fronting for an Israeli genocidal policy, but putting American faces on it, and therefore putting a target on Americans' backs. So I don't think we can overstate that, not just the dystopian nature of this aid scheme, but also the danger of it to U.S. national security.